Are we live? We are live. All righty then. Welcome to CMO Huddles Studios, the live streaming show dedicated to inspiring B2B greatness. This is your captain, Drew Neiser, speaking live from Silicon Valley today, and it appears we're experiencing a little bit of turbulence. The landscape is constantly shifting, and when economic pressures hit, the pressure on CMOs intensifies. The decisions you make as CMO can significantly impact your organization's ability to weather the storm and come out stronger on the other side. But fear not. Today, we'll be speaking with three bright minds in marketing leadership who have successfully navigated through storms. We're about to gain some serious altitude in our conversation today. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a ride filled with insights. And with that, let's bring on Marca Armstrong, CMO of Passport, who previously joined us on the show to shed light on the intricacies of event marketing and customer advocacy. Hello, Marca. Welcome back. Where are you and how are you?
Thanks, Drew. I am in beautiful Colorado, about 20 miles north of Denver. It's a gorgeous day here, and I'm doing well. I'm thrilled to be on the show again.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, let's see. Let's just jump in. It's funny. I saw this Gartner report, and it's a little gloomy out there, and the pressures on CMOs to deliver speedy results, regardless of the economy, are enormous. So, I'm wondering how do you share this mandate with your team? It's like, we need to hit new targets, without putting so much stress on them that they go, okay, forget it.
Yeah, so I think the key when we are in this turbulent environment is to keep it in small chunks, right? I mean, at the beginning of the year or last year, we set out our KPIs for 2023. Those KPIs haven't changed. And to your point, if anything, they've gotten more intensified. But if you continue to go after the team on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and say, where are we with the big number? Like you said, people are going to just lose sight of the horizon and the goal. So what we've done is really focus on what do we have to do this week? What do we have to do next week? And then how does that ladder up to the month? And then let's go celebrate that win. And as an example, just the other day, we had done a webinar with a partner. We had repurposed some content from our largest trade show, and our marketing operations manager put a note into the revenue Slack channel that said, listen, just want everybody to be aware of the results of that event that we just did. We had a record number of attendees. Our partner helped it get us. Thank you all for participating and joining, and making sure that everybody just understands it's important to look at the little things in front of you and not try and boil the ocean all at once, because that's when people do get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I love that, and it's reminds me of a particular difficult time at my company. We just had to do Happy Fridays, where we would find anything to celebrate. This was in the agency business in like 2008, when it was particularly grim. So I love that, find the little moments, try to gain perspective. I'm also reminded of a situation that I saw at a large company where a new CEO came in. Business was tanking because of a recession, and the CEO insisted on meeting with the direct reports every single day to see what they were doing to drive sales. And it was the most demoralizing. I mean, it crushed the spirit of these folks. It didn't have an impact on sales, and it was horrible. So let's keep going down this route of, okay, yeah, it's an imperfect world right now. And so other than, how do you sort of in this walk this fine line? Yeah, you've talked a little bit about it, of breaking it down, but can we get into anything more that one can do to sort of keep your team sort of, yeah, it's hard out there, but there's something.
Right. Well, so I think, one point that you just said, keep the team. And I've reflected a lot on this in preparing for this conversation, because when I started at Passport, it was the 10th of March, 2020. And I came into a high growth SaaS business And then guess what happened on the 13th of March that year, right? And so since then, we've not only had a pandemic, then we had the Great Resignation, then we had, this scary, like, is the recession coming? And now, there's the, hey, guess what? We gotta hold everything together here. What I've learned through that process is there's one thing about keeping it real for your team specifically, but you cannot lose sight of the people that you need to get your work done. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to hunker down and say to your team, listen, I know this is hard, and I will just, probably like everybody else, share a Slack message, text somebody, just randomly send an email. We will do the happy hours on Friday. We actually had the proposal operations team recently that just said, hey, we just need to pull up on a Thursday afternoon because we're all fried. We need to do that. But what we also need to do is do that with folks in product, with folks in sales, with folks in client success, because they're feeling it too. And at the end of the day, if we all come together in an environment where there's fewer resources, and we just came off a conversation, we're starting to think about budgets, there's less budget, you're starting to have to reduce your spend in places, you're going to be relying more heavily on other people. And you need to understand what those other people are. And that's one thing I've learned over this, trajectory over the past 3.5, 4 years, where we've gone through these cycles, is it's your team first. Yeah. First, you got to put on your own oxygen mask, then put on that of your team, but then make sure your ancillary folks are there too.
Yeah. All of those things are great. And reminders, as you were talking, I was thinking about the need to take stuff off the list.
Yes.
Right. In that, because we all make lists, and then the lists get and wait, we can do another thing, and wait, we could do this too. And that would be cool. And eventually all of those ideas were good, but the next thing you know is that the boat tips over.
Right. Oh, we love to boil the ocean. I mean, Passport's no exception, right? We started the year with strategic priorities that probably went 25 slides deep. And so now it's down to, what is the core go-to-market, right? Where is the revenue going to come from? Who are the customers we need to go after? Where is that white space within our customer base? Let's focus our programs and our marketing and our sales efforts there, and just keep it simple, right? I think there's something to be said for keeping things simple and not trying to overcomplicate. And again, I was encouraged by the conversation we just had in the last huddle around, listen, we all like shiny objects because we're marketers and we're creative people, and we want to make sure that we're using the tools. But sometimes having all the tools doesn't mean you're going to be more successful.
Yeah, it was interesting. Thanks for referencing that conversation. So we just we had a huddle today, and the conversation was both about MarTech and what you could trim, and AI in terms of where that might create some efficiencies. And it was interesting because a lot of folks are looking at tools that they were excited about 3 years ago and saying, I don't know if there's an ROI there. And the other part of that is the time suck that it takes for employees to learn it, to use it, and so forth. So
Right.
I have to comment on the fact that you had 25 pages of strategic initiatives, which and just so if you can get it to one page, and everybody knows that they're on that same one page, you can't get everybody on 25 pages.
Well, what happens is everybody has their own.
Right.
So, marketing had one, government relations had one, client success had a couple, sales has a couple, right? At the end of the day, it's, what are we going to do? Back to how you started this, the questioning. What do we have to do to meet the revenue number without beating a stick over everybody's head that says we have to meet the revenue number? Because to your point, that's just demoralizing to a group of people. And I've been in those calls too. It's, what are the activities and the things that we're committing to do? And let's chunk those out, so that then we can come back and report in on a revenue call on where we are, and making sure that you're working together. And so that's where I think we see success. And we started to see really some great examples of this when we went to our largest trade show in June of this year, which is the first time we'd all been back together in our space. It was kind of the largest gathering since the pandemic. And you just saw the cross-functional collaboration between product, marketing, sales, and it was just brilliant. It was just wonderful to sit back and watch it, because you knew that fundamental relationships were there, and whatever turbulent times we're going to go through, that's what's going to help us get through to the other side.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that because you mentioned there you are face to face, and so much of the, and I'm going to bring this up in our conversation tomorrow with Kim Scott and Radical Candor, because so much of leadership involves sort of brief face-to-face encounters. It's like the review process is clearly broken, and often are these confrontational, very painful, scary moments for employees, and not necessarily a moment. Whereas the notion of a quick interaction, hey, you did a great job on that thing, or a casual attaboy, or what we used to call it for soccer when you're coaching little kids, is the compliment sandwich. Hey, that was good. Maybe fix this, and that was good, right? But all of those happen in quick sort of one-on-ones where you drop by the person's office and say, hey, hi, or you're having coffee. That doesn't exist in the virtual world. So I'm curious what adjustments you've made to being a virtual leader. And again, in the context of people are stressed, and how do you notice that anymore?
I can notice it in people's tones of voice, whether it's through a Slack or through an email. I have this love-hate relationship with instant messenger. When my Slack will go off every day, all day, constantly. You can hear it in other parts of the house, right? But what it's good for, especially nowadays, is you can see who's stressed because they're constantly sending you things. And that's the time where you pick up the phone and say, okay, what's going on? And let's have a phone call. Or conversely, and I had a call with a manager yesterday, and she indicated that members of her team were stressed. And I said, with your permission, I'd like to reach out and just let them know that I'm here. And not that I'm going to do your job for you, but they just need to know that they've got support at a leadership level. So I think from an adjustment perspective, you really have to listen. I had a boss once who said, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You need to spend more time listening than you do talking. And so you really need to listen for those cues. And then when you see somebody's off, just say, hey, are you okay? Let's have a conversation. And then usually when you open up, you kind of get a fountain of response, right? Of dialogue. So
Right.
I just had to, rather than like back to the beginning of just sitting there with my head down, I've had to pick my head up and just listen more and see where people need some encouragement, and then take that time. And I usually try and do that at the end of the day. It's just kind of scan where people are.
I love it. So it's literally monitoring intent signals the way, or discontent signals in your team, and maybe one of them is they're messaging you all the time. Okay, all right, we will be back, but right now we're going to bring on Katrina Klier, who is the senior managing partner at Sage Strategy Group and an industry expert who has graced our stage before, to delve into the topic of growth strategy evaluation. Hello, Katrina. Nice to see you again. So, how are you and where are you?
Well, hi, Drew. It's great to be with you all again. Thank you for having me. I am coming to you from this beautiful, sunny, clear, crisp day in Metro New York City. And so it's a good one.
All right. So I know that you went through some roller coaster periods, both at Accenture and at Pros. Talk about how you guide your teams when the going gets tough.
Yeah, I think since I've always taken these like drive growth at scale jobs, I feel like I've bumped into this every job I've had, including this one. We have a lot of clients in the tech sector, and that's been interesting lately. I would say 2 things as a leader are kind of your best friend in really turbulent times, and that's transparency and empathy. And, you kind of have to mix the doses of those based on what's going on. But from a transparency perspective with your team and with your stakeholders, really just being clear and fact-based about what's going on, how things may or may not be changing, and what that may or may not mean to them and the company. It's just really important because people are anxious. Everybody catastrophizes when they don't have information. So just be transparent about what you know, and also be transparent about how, when, and where you're going to communicate with people, so they don't ever worry that they're going to be left out of the loop or they're going to miss something. Whether that's, we're going to have a stand-up meeting every morning for 15 virtual stand-up meeting, every morning for 15 minutes to give you an update and let you know what's going on, or if it's we're going to spend the first X amount of time of every team meeting we have once a week going through the status, whatever it is, just so people don't worry or think that they're going to be left out of the loop. And then context is helpful. I've always found people work better with context. So to the degree that you can be transparent about why something is changing or not, is just helpful for people. So it takes the guessing game of how things happened out of their head. And then, with empathy, these situations are always so fluid, inevitably, and having empathy that it's going to hit every person a little bit differently, whatever is going on. And you're not going to necessarily be able to predict how it's going to hit everyone, including yourself sometimes. But so just don't assume that you know what it's going to mean to them, and try and provide that space and grace for them to ask for what they need, reach out and ask them how, things could be more helpful for them and those kind of things. But have some empathy. You never really know what's going on in someone's life, and don't assume that you know.
Yeah. And that's so important. And I think this is so hard again in the virtual space. At a small level, I was looking forward to speaking and seeing a CMO at a huddle. And at the last minute, they said they couldn't go. And I said, and then I found out that their 4-year-old dog had died. And, as a dog owner, and I know as a dog owner, that is a horrible thing for a family. It's just such a sad, gut-wrenching moment. And so, but you don't know, because they might not want to tell you what's going on in their life. So yeah, that being empathetic, don't just assume that, that they're screwing up because you don't know what's going on in their life. I wanted to ask a question though. It's difficult sometimes in particularly when it's really rough and, companies not hitting their sales targets. The CMO doesn't always know. And you don't know what's going on, as you said, sometimes. And so how do you handle the stuff that you don't know? I mean, are you transparent about that as well?
Yeah, I try to be. I've always told my teams, I will answer any question that you ask me to the degree that I know the answer and am able to share that information. Because sometimes there's legal reasons why you can't say things just yet. So I think just be clear. It may or may not give people comfort that you don't know the answer. But if you don't know, then you can commit to go and find out and loop back to people, or say, I don't know the answer to that. I think we've had a lot of discussion about it. I don't think a decision has been made, but let me go check and see if there's been any momentum, right. And then, come back to people. But usually it's helpful just to remind people that we all really want the same things at the end of the day. I found, we all want the company to do well. We want our customers to be happy, and we want our employees to be happy and engaged. And it's kind of that easy and that hard at the end of the day. So reminding people that we all really do want the same things, I think can sometimes take some of the tension out of the air for people, that we actually have more that we're doing together than things that might be pulling us apart.
Well, and let's explore that. An interesting phenomenon I've noticed in huddles. So 3 years ago, 2 years ago, even though once this sort of COVID mode and we all went virtual, a lot of companies were doing okay in B2B and in 2020, 21. There was a period where there was no business, and then things were pretty good in 21 and 22. What I've noticed more lately is CMOs saying, the sales guys aren't making the target, or they're not using the tool, or they're not doing this. And so there's this finger pointing that's going on, and a search for scapegoats that you see, particularly when, again, we're not hitting our sales goals. So one, I'm curious if obviously that's an issue that CMOs have to grapple with, but with this finger pointing, is there a way to shield your team, but at the same time to encourage them to find solutions, like, oh, don't listen to sales, but better, get on this and solve this problem?
Yeah, I wish, whoever has the magic bullet to that situation, I think would be able to retire very early. But, missed revenue targets are every CMO and CRO's worst nightmare, right? It's just awful and demoralizing and upsetting. And again, kind of reminding everybody again that we all want the same things, then I think is important. And I don't have a lot of tolerance for finger pointing personally, because the causes of a revenue miss are rarely a single thing or a single person or a single team or a single campaign or any of those kind of things. It's always a combination of stuff. And so I kind of come back to data is your friend. Like it takes the emotion and tension out of the conversation. If you're like, okay, I hear you, you're upset, we're all upset. So let's get back to the root cause and let's get into the data and figure out where we can actually affect change, because none of us want to be in this situation 1 second longer than we have to be. So that can help people redirect. I'm also, and this is just me, not everybody operates this way, but other stakeholders in the company, the other parts of the executive team, sales teams in more detail, whoever, I'm like, look, if you're angry or upset about something that the marketing function is doing, you can come talk to me about that directly, one-on-one. And, you get some people that can be kind of ugly and nasty and yell, and it's like, all right, well, dump your bucket, get it out of your system. But you only get to do that with me. You don't get to do that with my leadership team or the rest of my function, because you know what? I need those people in the game with their head every day, moving us forward and making this better. So you don't get to go disrupt their world. You can come talk to me. I will listen to your feedback. I will try to take the constructive pieces out of it. And then I will share that in a way that my team can action it faster. But you don't get to go cause a bunch of chaos in my leadership team or organization. If it's really good news, then I let them go right to them. But when it's a stressful and not so great news situation, I'm like, no. I need their eyes on the ball. So you can come talk to me. Happy to have that conversation with you. But you don't get to go cause chaos, because that just slows all of us down at the end of it.
I love it. I don't. I'm curious. Have you run into a head of sales that just said, "Yeah, whatever, I'm still going to do it"? I mean, does that work?
It does work, but sometimes I've had to empower my leadership team to push back. Because when they get this phone call or someone's blowing up their mobile phone with a million text messages and other things, I tell them, I said, look, I have your back on this. You tell that person that Katrina has said she would rather have this conversation with you, and just send them to me and do not engage. Right. Just don't feed the beast, because it's not going to go anywhere positive if you do. But I have found that, you need to let your leadership team know that, because, you want them to feel empowered and that you have their back if they do a redirect. Because some of these people, they're more senior usually in the organization, and sometimes they can be not having their best day.
Yeah. And what it makes sense is, to me, is also going back to the conversation we had with Marca. A lot of issues happen where sales folks are under stress. They think, oh, I know, a micro campaign against this target would be great. Let me go to someone junior in the marketing department. And then suddenly that marketing person has to either say no, their default is saying yes, but that's not on the strategic plan. That's not a thing. And so they need to know that you are behind them, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you for that. We'll be back. But now let's welcome Gabi Zijderveld, CMO of Smart Eye, and a returning guest who has appeared on 2 previous shows to discuss rebranding and category creation. Hello, Gabi. How are you, and where are you?
Hey, Drew. Nice to see you again. I'm in lovely Somerville, Mass, right across the river from Boston.
Well, there we are. So we are spanning the continent today with East Coast, Central Time, and the West Coast. Very cool. Okay. So you've listened to both what Marca and Katrina had to say. I'm curious, sort of in sort of hearing what they all had to say. It must have sparked some thoughts or builds in terms of engaging and motivating your team during this sort of unpredictable period.
Yeah, absolutely. And the conversation just now with Katrina, right? Showing empathy, I think, is really important, but also understanding and being open-minded as to what people might have going on personally. I think that's really important. Often we're in a position to build hopefully long-term relationships with our team members and connect with them and have conversations also at a personal level. I think it's just really important to try and understand best you can what they have going on in their lives, and also understand that that could be very different than the things that you yourself have going on in your life. So that is key. So fully resonated with me when you guys were talking about that. But another thing that I think is super important to do when you're trying to keep your team motivated and engaged in tough times is to also understand, what are their individual career goals? What do they want out of their career? Where do they want to end up? Not maybe in that proverbial 5 or 10 years from now, but maybe a year from now, 2 years from now. Do they even want to stay in marketing, or would they love to hop over to another domain? Do they love just being an event manager and do that really well and manage all the events? Or do they want to have my job at some point in time in the future? So understand what their goals are and then figure out ways to help get them there. So with all my direct reports, I work on professional development plans. We set goals. We set and agree together on opportunities where they can learn and get exposure to new things they haven't done, either in the marketing domain or to build further business acumen or to develop as a leader. So I think that's also super important. I have a whole bunch of other ideas, but let me pause here.
Yeah, no, and because thank you for pausing for a second, because one of the interesting things is to say, yeah, short term, it's kind of grueling right now, but I'm thinking long term for you.
Yeah.
So, and I love that sort of switch of perspective. Let's get out of the short term and think about long term. But there's also something that we haven't really talked about yet on the show, and it wasn't even in the show plan. But I'm thinking about, if you think about on your career, some of the most, the times when you learned the most, the times where you really rose to the occasion were the most stressful times.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm thinking about, that Billie Jean King quote that the players see as they're going out onto center court, something like stress is a privilege. It's something very close to that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, and this is me being the optimist that I have, because it's so difficult when you're in the midst of battle to say, hey, this is really great. I'm stressed out and I'm going to learn more.
Yeah, I don't think I would ever word it that way, but it's so true, right? And one thing related to that I certainly do is, once I understand a bit better where team members want to develop or should develop, I sometimes just throw them in the deep. If there's a type of project going on, then they've never done it before. You know what? You're the project leader. And it doesn't mean you swim solo, right? I make very clear that I'm there as a sounding board. I can help guide them. I can help coach them. If they're not quite sure how to do it, I'll help them with it, as will other team members who've maybe done this before. But if you throw someone in the deep and let them run as solo as they can, that's a real opportunity there and then for them to learn, for them to take ownership, to have responsibility. And I love doing that. I will say, I also do remind my team members in situations like that, like, don't overthink it, chill a little bit, right? We're not doing brain surgery here. If you make a mistake or if something gets delayed, it's not like the patient is going to die on the operating table, right? It's not that mission critical. Sure, a lot of our customer-facing activity, we have to get it right, but there's wiggle room there, right? Like, rarely are things super urgent that it has to happen that minute. And rarely, perfection is sometimes the devil of,
the enemy of good.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes good enough is good enough. That's the thing I say as well, right? Don't overthink it. Just go, go, go. We're here to help you. Don't overthink it.
And while you were talking about the empathy and really understanding what's going on in people's life, I'm aware of situations where an employee in a group is not pulling their weight, and they have lots of things going in their personal life, but whatever reason, they're phoning it in, and they're 50% as productive as they are supposed to be. And there's that moment of, gee, I'm sorry things are bad in your life, but the rest of the team is carrying the weight of that. And I know this is a very particular scenario, but it happens more often than you think. And so I'm just curious if you've encountered that, and what do you do?
Yeah, I have encountered it a few times, thankfully not too recently. But I think again, leading with empathy is understanding what is truly going on there. And is it a moment in time, right? Is it maybe a child got very sick and they need to have surgery, but after the surgery and recovery period, the child is projected to be fine, going back to school, everything will be normal, right? That is one of the most stressful things a parent and employee can go through. And of course, as thankfully I work at a company now too, where it's always family first, and that's my ethos as well. But it's a discrete moment in time, right? And you have to support your employee through that as best as possible. And in as far as an employee wants to talk about the situation with other team members, you can explain it to the team and just rally. And we've even with short-term emergencies people have, right? Oh my God, COVID at the daycare is closed. I have 2 toddlers at home. Don't you worry, we got your back. And that's what our team Slack channel is all about. Like, ugh, sorry, your daycare is closed again, but don't worry about it. Let me know what I can do for you. We got your back. So if you create a culture like that, that helps. I think those are manageable time limited situations, if you will. If this is consistent and perpetual, that is really difficult. And I think this is also where, in my experience, you sometimes have to get in there and micromanage and really make very clear plans as to these are the goals of the job. These are the things you need to do. This is the timeline we're creating, for your deliverables, for your projects. And we're going to be checking in on that and seeing how it's progressing. And if for whatever the reason might be, the employee consistently cannot perform to what the requirements of the job are, then at the right point in time, I will have conversations with HR and see about what we can do. Because of course, depending also where in the world you are, there's legal limitations, and aside from the moral and ethical aspects of it all. But sometimes you're in a situation where you need to have the conversation, like, is this a line of business that you want to be in? Like, is this even the kind of job you want to have?
Yeah.
But again, you have to understand the situation.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I think we're going to talk about this tomorrow with Kim Scott. But if don't, I have to remember there was an employee that worked for me years and years ago. This was when I was at J. Walter Thompson, and we noticed, and it was hilarious, that this individual was a slow walker. And in advertising, everybody's a fast walker. And it just turned out it was a metaphor for this. What person wasn't right. They went on to have a fabulous career as a food critic. It worked out great for them. And this was the wrong place. And that's possible.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the wrong fit, or the type of company, or the pace of the company is just not how personality-wise you work effectively.
So, all right, I have one more question before we go to our CMO Huddles break. But so this is an interesting one, and maybe we get the opinions of everybody else afterwards. But you're at a startup, not a startup, but a smallish company that is, and small companies often think of themselves as nimble and being able to change direction and so forth. And when we talked with Marca at the very beginning of this conversation, you want to set a strategy and you want to follow it, but we want to be nimble. But nimbleness can stress out your team. So talk about, maybe you could share a time where you had to change direction quickly and how you brought your team along with you.
Yeah, actually recently, or at least I would say this year, we had come to market with a new product. So essentially it's our driver monitoring software, but now bundled with hardware, so that we have a complete end-to-end system that can be deployed in vehicles on the road already today, like let's say fleets of trucks or whatnot. However, supply chain disruption, right? We just couldn't get the parts to build the hardware. So we had quite a bit of backlog of demand. We just physically couldn't deliver the systems. So we had a very deliberate conversation with the business area leader saying, like, listen, we really got to dial back marketing here, because if we keep promoting this product and generating demand, but we can't deliver, it's going to be damaging to our brand. So even at the CEO level, everyone agreed, let's just put it a bit on the back burner, right? Not completely stop, but slow roll it. And then at that point in time, when we can actually build and deliver the systems, we're gonna dial open that marketing spigot. And that moment that we could turn it on came quite suddenly. And okay, questions about could we have planned better and could we have communicated better internally? Sure, a little bit of that, but it was also a serendipitous in that suddenly certain parts came to market and we didn't see it coming. So now we can build these systems and whoa, we got to go all in on our marketing. We had already drafted a plan. We had already created some content. We had already assigned a person on the team who was going to be the lead on that marketing campaign. And for that person, by the way, it was the first time they ever did something like that. So that was their growth opportunity. But it came so sudden that everyone was wrapped up in other things. So we had to have meetings on where we could dial back. And again, you talked about it earlier. It's all about prioritization, right? And something's got to drop sometimes. So we dialed other areas back and then had a lot of conversations with the team. Okay, these are the things we need to do for this particular product launch. This is the prioritization for that. All hands on deck. Who is going to help with what? And it was really just a divide and conquer. We had one person overseeing the whole project, doing hands-on work, but it was all hands on deck, myself included. I wrote plenty of website content and customer emails and you name it. So that's how we did it. But everyone understood what the opportunity was. I also explained to them why this was happening. And I made very clear that if you're working on this, something else is going to come off your plate and I'll help you decide what that is.
Yeah. And I think that's the key summary in all of this is you can't, if someone's got 5 priorities and then you suddenly say you've got to take add another one, something has to come off. And I think that's so. All right. Well, it's time for me to talk about and actually for you all to talk about CMO Huddles. We launched in 2020. CMO Huddles is a close-knit community of over 200 highly effective B2B marketing leaders who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. Given the extraordinary time constraints on CMOs these days, everything about CMO Huddles is designed to help leaders save time and empower them to make faster, better decisions. If you're a senior B2B marketer and need a shortcut to B2B greatness, take a second to sign up for our free starter program at cmohuddles.com. Okay, well, we happen to have 3 veteran huddlers with us, Gabi, Katrina, Marca. You're incredibly busy marketing leaders. I'm wondering if you could share an example of how CMO Huddles maybe has helped you save time in a critical decision moment or in another way. Let's start with Marca.
So I'm going to this has been a consistent theme, Drew, but what I find with CMO Huddles is that if you are questioning anything around a tech stack or a way of getting something done and doing it efficiently, participating in the Huddler program is a great way to pick the brain of your peers and say, hey, what have you tried? How have you done this? And I think, the conversations that we've been having about AI and what people are doing there, I mean, that has been fantastic, I think, for everybody in terms of the learning curve. And some people have gone full force into it and others are kind of crawling, walking, and running. But the knowledge sharing and knowing that, hey, you're not alone in trying to figure this out has been super helpful. And the ability then to reach out to people offline, which people have reached out to me on certain occasions for whether it's a job description or help with how they manage the situation. And I've reached out to others around like tech stack requests or feedback.
I love it. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Gabi, how about you?
Yeah, I think, Marca, you put it really, really well, but definitely vendor referrals, right? So if you're trying to outsource to an agency or hire a vendor for a specific project or some new technology you want to buy, get referrals, learn best practices. How have others done it, right? There's rarely a need to reinvent the wheel. What we're doing, others have most likely done it before. So I lean into that heavily just to get ideas and expedite the work I'm doing. The recent AI conversations are just awesome, right? Because we're all inundated with generative AI tools and you can't see the forest for the trees anymore. But also, I don't have time to experiment with all. And even in recent conversations, Drew, when we met in Cambridge in person, was it last week, maybe the week before, people are mentioning these tools and how they're using them. And I'm diligently taking notes and sharing that with my team, because now out of all this stuff out there, we can hone in on that and give it a shot. So that I love. Very
I love it.
efficient.
And that's exactly right. I mean, this is where we're trying to help you all save time.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, I have to review that transcript and make sure that I get the list of tools that were shared. Katrina, anything you want to throw in here?
Well, I agree with everyone else has said. I would say one of the other benefits of CMO Huddles is really, it is the community aspect of it. I mean, people are incredibly gracious and helpful with things, and I kind of view it as my mastermind group, if you will, that can turn hype into help. So, Gabi mentioned AI, so much hype, so much going on. It's like, okay, I don't know, how am I going to get my head around this? And you can ask this community and they will actually turn that hype into help. Like, start with this or try that, or don't worry about these, you're going to waste a lot of time. And that's the same thing with any kind of martech stack situation, or just I'm trying to figure out how to communicate something that's going to be complicated to my executive team or my board. Like others have said, almost always someone's had to tackle that challenge before, and this group is just really gracious with offering those lessons learned and just support.
I love it. Thank you for that.
If you
Turning
may-
hype into help. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I add one more thing? Because I
Okay.
think that's actually important, because many of us will come across this at some point in our career. I am currently not in transition, so I don't have the hands-on experience, but I have a lot of CMO friends out of CMO Huddles that are looking to either leave their current gig or they're in transition already. And there's a lot of emphasis on supporting those CMOs as well. I know you have a special huddle for them, but also what I love, and we see this on the Slack channel, is many of us get approached by recruiters for roles they're looking to fill, and it might not be the right role for us, but I'm sure as heck going to share that in CMO Huddles because it might be the right role for another CMO, right? So kind of supporting those of us that want to make career transitions, I think that's super awesome as well, because we're all going to be there at some point.
Well, thank you for that. And I could do this all day, but we're gonna get back to the show. But if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of them, do yourself a favor and check out CMOHuddles.com. Okay, so let's get back to this leadership thing, and let's do a quick speed round with. Give two, we've talked a lot about empathy and so forth, but most important leadership qualities when navigating through uncertainty and change. Just one from you, Marca.
Patience.
Gabi.
Clarity.
And Katrina.
Transparency.
There we go. Okay, so those are three really good ones that we can think and go into, and I think I'm going to cover many of those tomorrow with Kim Scott. So, and Gabi, you mentioned a story about an employee on the brink of burnout. I'm wondering if any of you have found a moment where you were able to save an employee who was sort of burning out. And Gabi, you just shaked your head, so go for it.
Yeah. So, and the learning came from a situation where I couldn't help the person because it happened so unexpectedly, and no one ever thought this person could burn out. They just imploded, and it gave me a lot of. This was earlier in my management career, and it gave me a lot of time to reflect on that. Right. So, what I do these days is as I get to know team members, I make very clear that yes, the nature of our work is stressful. The nature of our industry is stressful. At times we'll work really hard and at times it'll be less chaotic. But if you're consistently overloaded and consistently stressed, that is not good. And if you're beginning to notice that, let me know as soon as possible. And actually that did happen. I think it was about 1.5 years ago, where an employee came to me and they were getting super stressed out and beginning to notice things physically. And we really unpacked what was it that was stressing out this person, what was happening, and it were certain types of projects they had gotten dragged into. I was able to kind of reallocate resources and get that off that person's plate, have someone else who wanted to take it on. I got HR looped in, right? People and culture, so that we could make sure that our head of people and culture could chat with them as well. And we kept monitoring it. And because we acted right away and we asked the employee to give input in fixing the situation themselves, it ended up working out really well. And I was happy with that, but monitoring it still.
That's awesome. Okay. So what about your own mental health? I mean, I do coaching, and I often and I call it a little. Some of it is it's part shrinkage, but that's a part of it. But what are you doing to maintain your work-life balance? Because everything, and we all know 10 years ago, we might have woke up in the middle of the night and sent an email at 3 a.m, and hopefully we're not doing that anymore. We're saying, hey, well, it arrives in their inbox at 8 a.m. But what do you do, and how do you monitor to make sure that you're not so stressed out? And let's start. Mark, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm smirking, Drew, because I send emails in the middle of the night, but I actually send them to myself. I don't send them to other people because I'm fearful that I'm going to forget whatever was in my brain.
Right.
And so to that point, I had a good friend of mine turn me on to the Calm, CALM app, which is a meditation app for anybody who wants to try meditation. I have always spent my life exercising and participating in athletics all through college and even graduate school. But I got to a point where even going for a walk or a bike ride, my mind was still worrying. And so I needed to find another way to start to tune it off. And the Calm app is great because it checks in with you. It's like, how are you doing? And you're like, I'm really stressed. Like, okay, let's go 15 minutes in a corner, right? And here are the exercises that you're going to go do. And it's actually done wonders for me to just take a break.
Yeah, and I have to. I'm all in on Calm, both personally and know others that have gotten value out of it. Try very hard to set a limit for myself when I look at email. It's stopped like at whatever it is, 9 o'clock in the evening. I'm not going to check that device again, even though I know that an endorphin rush awaits me if I did. But I think the key here on this, and we've talked about this in Huddles, is you have to lead by example. And if you're somehow demonstrating your work-life balance and you're finding a way to stay calm, it rubs off, right? And they see it. I'm curious, Katrina, any thoughts in this area of work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do need to lead by example, and you do have to take care of yourself. I mean, I'm somebody that thinks better when I'm walking or doing something. So I like to walk many miles every morning. And some of that I might be listening to podcasts or audiobooks, or sometimes I'll, hold my phone and make, voice notes to myself. And there's a lovely stretch of where I walk where I'm walking through the woods and the trees and by a river, and it's just super lovely. And so I make sure no device is going to make noise so I can kind of do the walking meditation there. But, which is wonderful for me. I think we have to also tell people sometimes. I mean, even though it's a little weird, I mean, I'm not somebody that would usually tell a bunch of people that, but not that it matters, but it's just kind of like, why? But, saying to my team, you know what, I'm not going to take that meeting at 8 because it doesn't really have to be at 8 in the morning. Let's do it at 10 so I can get back from my walk at 8:30 and be here and present for you all. And just letting them know that I do those things. So they're like, oh, well, she moves some things around sometimes, or, she goes and takes time every morning to do this. And so that means I can do it too.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting moment. It's like, do you put on your calendar as the CMO, hey, I'm taking a walk here? And, because they all know that you're putting in the hours. There's not an issue there, but it's 4:30 on a Thursday and I have it on my calendar, nature walk. And so I'm curious, Marca, in the interest of transparency, everybody can see your calendar. Do you put personal time things on that so people can see it?
I put work blocks, and our executive admin knows, and I'm working mountain time. So I try and get online by 7 a.m. mountain. So I'm working with the East Coast. But there are some mornings I just can't do that. So for whatever reason. And so I just block it out. And she works around my calendar, and my team knows, oh, yeah, Marca will be on at 8 Mountain, 10 Eastern. For the most part, I try and keep the Eastern hours. But the thing is, I make sure I log off by 4 o'clock, because it's 6 o'clock on the East Coast. And by then, I hope you all are spending time with your families, right? And not me reading my email. So yeah, I block it off. I'm not bashful about doing that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and that's a perfect lead into, we always quote Ben Franklin on this show. And what would Ben say about sort of being a leader and leading by example? And here's what he says: he that can compose himself or herself is wiser than he or her that composes books. So there you go. And it was funny because I was going to ask you, who are the thought leaders or specific books or resources that have influenced your leadership approach? So that will be a good segue for that. Any thoughts?
I'm a big fan of Adam Grant's work. I mean, he's got a lot of articles as well as longer things. And I like how he's very balanced in what he talks about. And it kind of can give you some brain food to stop and think for a minute and usually figure things out.
Awesome. Okay. Adam Grant. Anybody else? Marca, Gabi, and people that you...
Yeah, +1 on Adam Grant, but also, frankly, on a more pragmatic level. And this, I don't want to be too cheesy plugging CMO Huddles too much, but I have over the years built up this group of CMOs that I go to for advice and ask them how they do things. And I just find it pragmatic and helpful to connect with my CMO peers and learn how they handle certain situations or address certain challenges. So
I love it. Marca, before we go on to final words of wisdom, were there any thought leaders that you follow that you find particularly helpful?
Yeah, I thought Gabi was going to say Brene Brown. That's where I thought you were going with your comment.
Yeah.
And I'm a fan of hers, but there is a great book, if you haven't read it, called The Energy Bus, which while we're talking about how do you manage through turbulent times, it just gives you tips about how you take negative energy and turn it into positive energy in your life, in your work, with your teams. And the PR agency that I've worked with, the principal had given it to me during COVID. And it's a quick read, and it's by John Gordon, and it's just super helpful. I was going to pull it off my shelf, but I must have left it upstairs.
Awesome. All right. Well, those are great. Maybe some of those will end up being the best-selling authors that we feature in a career huddle in 2024. Okay. So now it is time. Final words of wisdom for other CMOs when it comes to leading your team in turbulent times. And we'll do this in reverse order of where we started. So I think that's Marca first, I think. I don't know. Go for it, Marca.
So what I would say, and I think this has been a common theme, is don't assume you know how other people are doing and how they're feeling. I think that was the theme of empathy, the theme of clarity, and then the theme of patience. So take the time to understand where your team is and then lead them from there.
Love it. Okay. Katrina, final words of wisdom.
You can't take care of others if you haven't taken care of yourself, at least not very well. And so I would say really make sure you've got a community of support for yourself. And that can be other CMOs. I think the three of us here are big fans and have all talked to each other in various capacities too. So those kinds of things in your family, other friends, professional mentors and community people that you've bumped into in your career, just have your people that you can go to, whether it's 10 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock in the morning when you need help with something, that they'll help, or they'll at least listen, which is often
and I'm going to just add to that because, all of you have made deposits in the Goodwill Bank. And that's part of this is that, if another person who's in a stressful moment, reach out, help them. Karma is a boomerang. And so, you put some deposits in and it will come back. Okay, Gabi, take us home for final words of wisdom, leading your team in turbulent times.
Yeah, give your team members an opportunity to grow and learn, but above all, give them opportunities to shine and showcase the work that they're doing.
Give them opportunities to shine. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Gabi, Katrina, Marca. You're all amazing sports. And thank you, audience, for staying with us. Please join us in 2 weeks when we'll be talking about global marketing with Jacques Batal, Dean Nichols, and Olga Noha. Cue the music.
CMO Huddles Studio is produced by Melissa Caffrey. Our production assistant is Laura Parkin. If you'd like to learn more about CMO Huddles, please visit cmohuddles.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep on sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness.